My pleasure and delight to be here with Dr. Adrienne Krone, who is the Assistant Professor of Religious Studies and the Director of Jewish Life at Allegheny College in Pennsylvania. As I know, your main research focuses on food and farming practices in contemporary American religions, Jewish life, and beyond. So thanks for taking time to talk.
Thank you for having me today. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. So just to start, what are Jewish farms?
That's a great question. So starting in 2004, the Isabella Freedman Jewish Retreat Center founded a farm, Adamah, at their retreat center, thinking that people could learn about food and food production and where some of these Jewish food values could be enacted in place in the fields. And from there, as they started training programs, as they started sending people out into the world who knew about these connections and the value that it had for connecting Jews to tradition, to biblical stories and holidays, it grew from there. So there's about 20 Jewish farms.
In America?
In America and Canada. Mm-hmm. So I often say North America to include our Canadian friends. And they comprise a movement that they call the Jewish Community Farming Movement.
Okay, very interesting. And of course, does this intersect at all with the Israeli, which is a whole other larger system, the Israeli farming world?
In some ways, a lot of them go to kibbutzim for training programs, have connections with Arava and other places in Israel that are doing sustainability work and ecological work.
But would you say that the North American culture is pretty distinct?
Mm-hmm. Okay. I would say that, because there hasn't been this connection. There is a farm that has a historical connection, which is one of the farms that I'll be talking about today.
Right.
But most of them really came out of this kind of environmentalism movement in the early 2000s. Yeah.
Now, my exposure to this work is that it's generally not, hey, I really want to be a farmer and I happen to be a Jew, but that with intentionality, I wish to infuse my Jewishness with farming and my farming with Jewishness to some degree.
For some people. Yeah, and some folks end up there and say, I really want to be a farmer, I'm really interested in environmentalism, I want to learn these skills, and then they get there and they say, oh, there's some Jewish pieces here.
Interesting.
Some go and say, I'm really interested in Judaism and all aspects of Judaism, and this is one of them, and they get there and they say, oh, farming is kind of fun and invigorating, and so it goes both ways.
Interesting. So for those who bring spirituality into this, what does ritual look like in that world? What are some of the rituals that are emerging from the Jewish farm world?
Yeah, so there's some really interesting rituals where they're combining kind of human and animals in the same ritual space and thinking through what it means to be in community and to be in a ritual community. So at Adamah, when they host the Hazon food conferences, they often, Sarah Chandler, who has been involved in this work from the very beginning and was at Adamah for many years, often hosts a shachrit with the chickens, where you go out and you, at very early in the morning, 7 in the morning, and open the gates and let the chickens out. Yeah. And then she'll include a meditation where you are meant to pick one chicken and follow it around and see what early morning looks like for the chickens. And think about how early morning looks for the chicken that's kind of stretching and walking around for the first time and seeing what the weather's like and how that compares to kind of waking up and doing the morning ritual blessings for Jews. Yeah,
very interesting. So, and what is she trying to promote there? Like what can be spiritually gained from that?
Yeah, I think it's just kind of looking through the eyes of another creature.
Okay.
And understanding different creatures that live in our world and are part of our world, and we're maybe going to eat eggs for breakfast. Yeah. And so this is a way before that happens to think through the world and think through mourning through the eyes of another living being.
Yeah, yeah. You know, there's this Hasidic story. They couldn't find the Rebbe, and it's a long story, but then they found him at the pond listening to the prayers of the frogs. I think about that story. Then there's the famous rabbinic teaching around that the Israelites forgot how to sing. Yeah. And then after they got through the sea, they heard the birds chirping, and so they learned how to sing again. And I think of in Tractate Eruvin in the Talmud that if we hadn't been revealed the Torah, we would have learned it from the animals.
Yeah.
You know, that famous passage. Yeah. So I think we've kind of lost that. I don't have to tell you this. I mean, but I'm just reflecting. I mean, I think we've kind of lost this connection. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious what can emerge by redeveloping it. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, like, do we find that in reconnecting with the earth and the creatures of the earth, that tends to lead towards higher welfare commitments? Do people tend to merely develop a spiritual consciousness, or is there an ethical commitment that emerges also?
I think spending time with animals and seeing how they engage the world mm-hmm. will almost inevitably end up with a different understanding of what it means for animals to be in the world and for what welfare could look like. Right. And so for Adama, they've actually made a change recently where they were using kind of general hybrid chickens, and if you follow a hybrid chicken around, it might have trouble walking and it might be kind of weighted funny, and they've switched out to heritage birds. Right. And so one of the times I was there for the shockweight with the chickens, there were both birds, and so you could see how they moved through the space and how they squawked and made noise mm-hmm. and fought with each other and all the things that chickens do in different ways because of their genetics. Okay. And so it's a place where you can actually see some of that welfare, mm-hmm. where the higher welfare birds they're able to fly, and they often just leave the yard where they're supposed to be and go explore somewhere else because they have the ability to fly over the fence, where some of the hybrid birds don't mm-hmm. have the ability to still do that. Mm-hmm. So you could be following your chicken and it's walking and then it's gone. Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's powerful. So where does this stuff come from personally for you? Like, how did you, like, you've gone on this whole journey of your work and your research and your scholarship. So, like, where does this come from for you?
This actually started, so I often credit, first of all, my mother. So we always had a garden. I'm from Buffalo, New York. We always had a garden for the couple months a year that you can have a garden in Buffalo. Yeah, right. And so we were always growing food, mm-hmm. and she made sure we were outside, and we were visiting farm stands before I had a sense that was a strange thing to do for mm-hmm. suburban folk. And so then, as I was in graduate school and thinking about what I wanted to research for a longer period of time, I wanted to look at food, I wanted to look at food practices, and I went to a TEVA seminar, which is an environmental education organization, and saw some of this world and saw what's available for people now that wasn't even necessarily available when I was in my mid-20s, which is the age that a lot of people kind of enter into this Jewish community farming movement. And I got really excited, and I saw people that maybe don't belong to synagogues or don't engage what we think of as like traditional Jewish community organizations finding a space.
So interesting. So how big of a problem is factory farming, and what would it actually take to end factory farming?
Factory farming is a huge problem. It's a problem. I talk about this in classes that I teach with students. It's a problem on every level. It's a problem of the environment and the land resources and the carbon that's emitted and the
nitrous oxide
and all of these pollutants that are going into the air when you contain animals in certain ways. In North Carolina recently with the hurricanes, a bunch of the pig lagoons actually flooded, and so then you have waste that contains antibiotics and all of these toxins that goes into rivers, and so it's a huge environmental issue. It's an animal welfare issue, so certainly containing animals onto mass feeding lots and into these huge factory farms is not the way that animals were meant to live. And then it's a people issue. And so thinking about who works in factory farms and what the labor looks like. And these are often vulnerable populations of immigrants and people that have come across the border and don't have another choice. They're often undocumented, and so then when they're being mistreated, when their job causes emotional and physical distress on a daily basis, they're not able to complain about it, and they don't have the same rights as workers do in other spaces to say, this is wrong and I can't keep doing it.
I saw that firsthand in Postville, Iowa, and in other places. And so there is a major environmental issue. There is the worker justice issue. There is, as you said, the animal welfare issue. Then there's the human health issue of the chemicals involved and the like.
Course.
And as you were touching, I think also the racial justice issue, that all of a sudden in food deserts, why is it that a beef burger is going to cost me less than kale? Right? Or I can't even get the kale. But this stuff can be made so cheap in a certain way because of that super cheap labor that's exploited and all this other. So I don't think, I don't know why there isn't a stronger war against factory farming, given how much it intersects with other issues outside of the animal rights world, where it's in full force. But we think we would see this in other places as well. But the big ag money is just massive.
And it's hard to access. I live in a small town in Pennsylvania. It's hard to access other options in most places in this country. So my students who take classes with me on Judaism and justice in food want to make changes and they want higher welfare meat, but where are they going to get it? We have 2 small grocery stores in our town and a Walmart. So, and our campus dining, Parkhurst Dining, does a great job of trying to find higher welfare. They use higher welfare eggs, but at some point, factory farms is what's available. And so until people become aware of the issues and have a sense that there should be other options available everywhere, available in food deserts, available in all of these places, there isn't even a choice. Right. Now, do I understand you're also vegan? I am. Okay, so and maybe as the last question, what's that about for you? It's about all of these things. So I did my graduate work in North Carolina, which is a state that has a lot of problems, especially around factory farms. It's the biggest pork producer in the U.S., and the numbers go back and forth, but there's often more pigs in North Carolina than people. And there, the environmental toll, the people toll, the animal toll is extremely visible on a regular basis. When there's an environmental disaster, there's a hurricane, there's a flood, and then you also have this disaster being compounded because of the factory farms. And even as I was doing research, one of the field sites that I used for my dissertation work was a grass-fed cattle farm. And so it's grass-fed start to finish. It's called Baldwin Beef. And to fund the amount of time and land it takes to fully raise a cow on grass, he has a breeding hen operation as well. So it's a money issue, it's a capitalism issue, it's a justice issue on every level. And the more I looked into these things, the less I was able to keep eating what I had been eating. And it wasn't even an intentional, today I'm going to become a vegan. It was at some point I realized I hadn't eaten meat in 6 months. I said, okay, I'm a vegetarian. I went to a field site that was vegan and then was like, okay, this is working. It's fine. 6 months later, I was like, I guess I'm a vegan. Right. You and I couldn't be more different. In our case, my wife and I became vegans on our wedding day. And we were like, this is the day. This marks it. We broadcasted it to the world. I mean, my wife is very private, Shoshana, but I'm very public, so I broadcasted it. We're vegans, so that's very funny. So I had the great opportunity to learn from Dr. Krone at our Shemayim Va'aretz retreat 2 years ago, and from your scholarship in this wonderful essay that's going to be included in this work from SUNY Press that Dr. Jacob Lebenz and I have been editing. So thank you for that. And there's other articles on Shemitah, on the sabbatical year, and the like you can find online. And we'll continue to find more ways to continue to learn from your work. So thank you so much for taking this time. Thank you for having me.
Keep up the great work. And we can all continue to reflect on our relationship to the earth, to animals. Check out some of these Jewish farms, over 20 in North America, and learn from innovative ritual that is now emerging. Have a great one.